Hey, how's it going everyone? This is Dominick from the Comic Book Report YouTube channel, over here doing another guest review for organicpricedbooks.com. And today I'm really excited to talk to you about one of my favorite DC events of all time. Of course, we're talking about Infinite Crisis. And this omnibus is absolutely packed. A couple things to note about this volume: the issues in it were written primarily by Jeff Johns, Gail Simone, and a good handful of others. It was illustrated by artists such as Phil Jimenez, Ivan Rice, and more. There's such a collaborative effort on all of these different mini-series and issues throughout this entire book. It is pretty breathtaking. The comics in the volume itself were published by DC Comics beginning in 2005. As far as the issues themselves, this omnibus collects Action Comics issues 826, 829, Adventures of Superman issues 639, 642, Countdown to Infinite Crisis, Days of Vengeance issues 1 through 6, Days of Vengeance Infinite Crisis Special, JLA issues 115 through 119, Infinite Crisis issues 1 through 7, Infinite Crisis Secret Files, the OMAC Project issues 1 through 6, the OMAC Project Infinite Crisis Special, Rand Thanagar War issues 1 through 6, the Rand Thanagar Infinite Crisis Special, Superman issues 216, 219, Villains United issues 1 through 6, Villains United Infinite Crisis Special, and Wonder Woman issue 219. This book comes in at a whopping 1,424 pages. It's in an oversized hardcover format with a nice binding that I'll show you momentarily. But before we all take a look at that binding, I do want to finish just looking at this dust jacket in greater detail. We have some great art on the front and back cover. I do think the spine is a little underwhelming as far as the art or graphic we're given. It's not terrible, but I feel like they could have gone for something more eye-catching. So again, we'll take a look at the dust jacket with the interior flaps this time so you can get a full picture of what the dust jacket itself looks like. And after that, we'll go ahead and transition over to the under the dust jacket artwork on this edition print. I really love that they gave us a under the dust jacket piece of art for this book. I think it really just elevates this print, this copy for me. I absolutely love it. I really do feel like it's just bonus artwork we get as collectors on the under the dust jacket, just hardbacks themselves. Like, just take a look at that. I love that we have DC's main three on the front of the book. The spine is, of course, a replication of the spine seen on the dust jacket. And the back of the book, we have Superboy Prime. All in all, just a really good couple of art direction choices here for the Under the Dust Jacket hardback itself. Really stunning. Absolutely happy to see it. And now that we're finished up with that, I do want to transition to taking a look at the binding for this omnibus. Now, there is definitely glued binding in this omnibus. I do think that there also is sewn binding by my looking at it, but it's a little bit hard for me to tell, to be honest with you. I did read this cover to cover, however, and I will say the binding was really strong. It seems to be holding up well after my first reading, and I'm really optimistic about the longevity of this print. And now that we've had ample time to go over the exteriors, the binding, and just some of the contents of this book, we'll go ahead and dive into the book proper. I'll do a quick flip through, try not to give any spoilers here, but more of a sampling of what you can expect should you want to go ahead and pick this up, which I definitely recommend. Like I said, this is one of my all-time favorite DC event books. It's already an older DC event, relatively speaking. It came out, quite a few years ago now, but I still think it feels very modern, very fresh. For those that maybe don't know, in many ways this is the sequel or follow-up to Crisis on Infinite Earths. However, I think if you've never read that series, you can still absolutely enjoy this omnibus and even Infinite Crisis. I think the elements from that miniseries that you really need to know, they fill in the gaps for here within this book, but I do feel like if you've read Crisis on Infinite Earths, it will definitely help inform your experience of this event and give you a bit of a fuller picture. But like I said, I like that they kind of took their time where you feel like you have all the details you need to just read this by itself. I think that that's absolutely a strength for this book, but personally, I would recommend also checking out Crisis on Infinite Earths. So Infinite Crisis itself is a 7-issue event series. I have actually read that in the past after reading Crisis on Infinite Earths, but I never had the opportunity to really dive into all of the different tie-ins and kind of prelude mini-series that all lead into Infinite Crisis, which are collected here in this omnibus. And I have to say, it made the reading experience all that more rewarding, because frankly, all of these other issues and miniseries all kind of fill up the front and middle of the book, and Infinite Crisis doesn't really come in until the very end of the book itself. Interestingly enough, it is mapped in the way where we have all the different miniseries. Then when we get to Infinite Crisis, there are a couple Infinite Crisis special issues that are braided in throughout the Infinite Crisis issues themselves, so it's not just a straight Infinite Crisis issues 1 through 7 at the back. But I think that the mapping makes logical sense, and they kind of braid in the issues where they need to be, so you have more or less one seamless storytelling experience. And I really applaud them for that. I think that it did it in such a way that I didn't feel like the momentum was too broken or anything like that, and you feel like you get a fuller, more cohesive story within the event. I do think you can read Infinite Crisis by itself, just the event series, and still have a great time like I did, but I will say the payoff is all that more satisfying if you read this omnibus and get to read all of these little mini-series. I think particularly of note, I really like the Villains United arc. It was kind of the formation of this kind of anti-hero team of villains with characters like the Catman and Deadshot, and I just found this team to be fascinating. I was getting a little bit of a Suicide Squad vibe, and again, it's kind of like the anti-heroes. What are they going to do? They're a bit mercenary. Do they fight for right, or do they fight for the side of evil? And I just thought it was a really compelling little mini-series that really made me engaged and intrigued with this handful of characters that I maybe didn't care as much about before. I also thought the Rand-Thanagar War was pretty fascinating. I've always been a kind of passing fan of Hawkman, and so to have this kind of war between his people and the citizens of Ran, I thought was really fascinating. We have a good deal of just kind of intergalactic politics that again all lead up to the door of Infinite Crisis. I thought that that was a kind of fun science fiction, more cosmic level adventure for those that do feel a little bit bogged down with kind of your standard Earth-based superhero fare. I like that we got a lot of variety in this series. We also have a bit with the Spectre. If you're a fan of him, we see that character in ways I've never seen him portrayed before or since. Definitely memorable. The whole mini-series with the Spectre is all about kind of the magic users within the DC universe. We get to see Detective Chimp, which I really liked. A really, really fun, like I said, set of mini-series here. Another miniseries we're given, the OMAC Project. We read that one near the beginning of the omnibus, and I think it is one of the best. It's kind of a AI kind of dystopian, scary little story there that has all of these other DC kind of clandestine organizations showing up in it. I think that this was a really fun beginning of the omnibus kind of set of stories there. A lot of great characters. Interesting how they kind of incorporate that with Batman and different things like that. Overall, these miniseries were a ton of fun, and I think if you don't like one, you were bound to like one of them in this book. There are a lot of different styles. We have some different creative teams on there, but it led this omnibus a lot of variety. And I think for a book this big, it was fun feeling like every couple hundred pages we got kind of a vastly new story, only to have everything tied together with Infinite Crisis. It was just kind of a masterstroke. And while some of these tie-ins might not be super critical to still enjoying Infinite Crisis, like reading Crisis on Infinite Earths beforehand, it just makes the experience that much more full. And I think when you get to Infinite Crisis, you're almost celebrating. You're so excited, and you can't wait to see how everything comes crashing together. I know for me, I absolutely loved revisiting Infinite Crisis. This is only my second time reading the event itself, and it was a much more satisfying experience reading this entire omnibus leading into it. As far as the storyline of Infinite Crisis, I'll try really hard not to venture into any spoiler territory, but let's just say it is a big crossover event that has implications on the entire DC universe, and we really see some of our main heroes, especially the DC Trinity, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, stretched and to their just limit. We get to see these characters frayed and maybe not at their best. They're not at their most kind of shining paragon example of superheroics, and I think that that was a really fascinating look at some of our heroes. I also like the way that some of the second or third tier DC heroes and characters were given ample time to shine in this series without feeling like they were shoehorned in. It really is just a fascinating look, and I think it is such a brilliant series to read. The back of the book gives us a decent handful of extras, particularly with different cover art and just different art samplings. I really think that this is beautiful for a book like this, that we still got a handful of extras at the very back. Really, really lovely to see. It rounds out the collection rather nicely, I think, and honestly, this was a very satisfying event omnibus, and it was my first opportunity to read one in the DC prints. I've read a couple Marvel event omnibuses, but this felt truly epic, and it gave me a good sense of scope and feel for the DC universe at large. I think if you're a DC fan, this might be a must-read. At any rate, if you want to pick up your own copy, definitely check out organicpricedbooks.com, and if you want more comic book reviews from me, Dominic, you can check out my channel, The Comic Book Report. I'll try to do a more comprehensive review of the Infinite Crisis Omnibus, probably with some spoilers in the coming weeks, so definitely check me out if you're interested. Otherwise, have a good one.